All right.
Yeah, I need to too.
Bruce, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bruce Mylrea. I'm a holistic nutritional counselor with a W, like whole, like the whole.
Is that all you're going to say?
That's it.
Okay.
I'm keeping it short and sweet.
Good for you. My name is Melissa Layne. I'm a college professor and I teach sports nutrition. I'm in year number 15. My specialty is a little more about metabolism and what happens in the body, intermittent fasting, alcohol, metabolism after menopause, things like that. So I'll keep it short too.
Okay, I'm Sohailla Digsby. I'm a registered dietitian. I also have been teaching fitness for over 20 years, so I love the blending of those two things together. I like to really focus on how to make things practical and help people be their best in all 6 areas of wellness and not just do so good in one area and rob from the others. And I'm a mom of 3 kids, 10, 13, and 16, so spending time in the kitchen is a big part of my life. So I've written a cookbook and some other things to help people really practically make the most of their nutrition while they're being active and enjoying both.
Hi everyone, I'm Tricia Silverman. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm a certified wellness coach and a fitness instructor, and I love to help people with their health. And I most recently wrote this book available at the booth, Healthy Dividends, and there's an emphasis on longevity in that book. I teach the active aging certification here at SCW, and really happy to be here.
Fantastic. All right. They will each take 2.5 minutes answering the questions. So who's got the first question? So how careful do we need to be about naturally occurring sugar versus added sugar? Great. Why don't we start with Tricia?
Okay, I'll start with that. I think right now we need to be really concerned with our immunity and boosting our immunity, and fruit is part of that. I worry about the keto diet because it emphasizes going really low in fruit. I think fruit is part of a healthy diet. I don't know anyone on the planet, and if you guys know anyone, tell me, that has gained weight through eating fruit. However, when people are looking for weight loss, what I find works really well is a budget of calories. And with that budget, you can make a meal plan out of that budget, but if we stay within our budget, it can help us to lose weight. I think fruit is part of that budget. I do think if we're trying to lose weight, we could go over that budget with fruit, with fish, with Oreos, with whatever, but we all have that budget. So fruit should be part of your budget for the day for sure. It impacts your immune system in a very positive way, especially now with the coronavirus going around. It protects against cancer all over your body, but particularly in the area of your throat. We're in fitness, right? So we need our voices. You want to protect your voice and your throat box, we want fruit.
Fructose that comes from fruit is really different the way it's processed than if it's the way it's processed by your body than if it's different process. Like say you're having a processed food that has fruit as one of the ingredients in the form of fructose. It could be some sort of syrup that's been made or various things, but if it's actual whole fruit, the benefits that you get from that are going to greatly outweigh any negatives that you'd get from it, as long as you stay within your budget. And I think that's a great way to think of it. Everybody has a different amount that they need for the fuel that they require based on their size and their movement and their hormones and their age and all those pieces. And so fruit usually isn't something that's hard for fitness-oriented people to get in. So it is easy to overdo it, I think, because people will put 3 or 4 fruits in a smoothie, and then they'll say, aren't fruits good for you, and do it again later. Is it causing weight gain? Not usually, but I have seen occasionally when people overdo fruit, but it's usually not. It's kind of the least of our worries is to avoid it. Now, fruit juice is a whole nother story. I strongly discourage fruit juice more than 4 ounces a day. If you love it, have your 4 ounces a day. If you don't, then just skip it, and for kids too. It's just super processed. Even if you're juicing, you're going to not get as much satisfaction and as many benefits.
Totally and completely agree with what they say, both for how much you eat from fruit and for vegetables. Fructose is metabolized in your liver, totally different than the other types of simple sugars, sucrose, glucose, galactose, all of those things. But then you also have to look at what your natural occurring sugars are doing to your insulin levels. Most of the time your fruit, because you're eating fiber with it, is going to lower your glycemic index, so your insulin levels will be lower. And whenever your insulin levels are lower, your growth hormone is higher and your fat burning lipolysis is higher. Whenever your insulin levels are higher, growth hormone drops and lipolysis drops. So there's a time to have a simple sugar, even if it's in the pure form, and there's a time to have a complex sugar in the pure form before your workout and simple sugar after your workout, so that your workout remains catabolic and afterwards you become anabolic.
I think Tricia said you'll never see anybody that gets fat eating fruit. That's true, I agree. Fruit juice. Free sugars are bad news. You guys, free sugars aid and abet in weight gain in this country and disease promotion. I personally don't believe that sugar is the number one factor. I think fat in our diet in the form of saturated fat and cholesterol and all these things that we're eating is the big culprit, but sugar sure helps shovel it into your mouth. And the Union of Concerned Scientists, which is the largest nonprofit of scientific minds on the planet, says that if we could eat just 2 more cups of fruit a day, we'd save 500,000 lives in this country. So we suck at nutrition in this country. It is not hard. It is very simple. Eat fruits and vegetables. Have a nice day.
The only time I see that you could have too many fruits is when you're using it to displace other things. You know, like if I'm really busy, I want to have a banana for lunch. You know what I mean? Or things like that. Just grab whatever's easy, eat a bunch of watermelon, whatever's handy, and then you'd be displacing other things you need. So that could happen. But for the most part, you know, moderation, I think, is still always a good thing. But 2 to 4 servings is really a good goal.
But technically, if you knew what your Harris Benedict or your resting metabolic rate was, could you eat that much fruit in one day without having some other things? Could you eat 1,800 calories of fruit one
could.
day?
And you would lose muscle mass?
Yeah.
Right.
So you would
And
have...
you'd feel like crap because you wouldn't have your protein.
Right.
So I think your cravings are going to come into play there.
And if you reduce your added sugar, then the naturally occurring sugars in your fruit are actually very satisfying. Like right now you might be like an apple satisfying whatever, but if you cut back on added sugar, then apples and things like that really are very satisfying, and they don't trigger cravings like added sugar does. So fruit is a blessing. Make the most of it.
Yeah, great. Next question. So is there best time, is timing your micronutrients, not just your macronutrients, but is there a space and time that's more beneficial for your micronutrients after a workout? Where, why don't you?
Because your water-soluble vitamins and your fat-soluble vitamins and your minerals circulate throughout your body in waves as you intake them. And of course, the more you pee it out, the more you're going to pee out water-soluble things and vice versa. They're not specifically going into the muscle cells at the rate that the insulin is opening them for protein and carbs afterwards. So think of your vitamins and minerals as a time release and not something that you have to hit that 30-minute window to make the most of.
I want to add to that. I think it's great what she said. I think within your day, you do want to get a balanced diet. Some of your nutrients that, especially when we talk about fruit, some of that protection from fruit, after a day, it diminishes, so that we want to have fruit every day. So you want to have a balanced diet every day. And you don't want to put up, well, I'm not going to eat fruit today because I'm doing keto. I don't think that's a good idea. I think get a balanced diet every day so you do have that reserve of nutrients when you need them. When you look at cultures of longevity, and that's kind of what I specialize in, aging, and how they eat, they're really not worried, like what time should I eat this, should I eat? They just sort of eat. It's sort of intuitive. They eat a balanced diet. They don't eat junk. And they do a lot of low-impact activity throughout the day. They're gardening, they're moving, they're making their own food. They're just busy. And I think that it's important that we just think intuitively a little bit about nutrients and eating. And I think it's in fitness, we do want to help people with that muscle growth. So there is definitely evidence of the protein regarding the rest of the nutrients, I haven't seen a lot, but that doesn't mean it might not emerge. But I think it's a really good question. I actually haven't heard that question in our panel before, so that's a good one. Yeah. Thank you.
And one thought on that is, as you digest vegetables and fruits that have potassium and other, things that are being water soluble and not, I think it's super important to realize that those impact your blood pressure. I mean, even your blood pressure can be impacted within amount, and I don't know the exact amount of time, but within an amount of time of eating certain high potassium foods and different things like that. So having those ongoing throughout your day is going to impact your overall health in ways that are small but noticeable over time.
Bruce, did you?
Well, the question I think was about protein. Who didn't hear
His
us?
question was about
Who?
vitamins and minerals,
Micronutrients.
Oh, micronutrients. Okay. Well, probably throughout the day is good. Yeah, I had some protein comments, but I mean, you mentioned protein, and I would say, as an industry, we're obsessed with protein, and we eat twice the amount of protein in this country than the rest of the industrialized world. We eat over 120 grams per day. The World Health Organization recommends 50 grams a day coming from plant sources, which is where all protein comes from. And so we eat over twice the amount of protein, primarily in the form of animal protein in this country, and we die a decade sooner than the rest of the industrialized world. And 650,000 people die of heart attacks every single year in this country because of eating too many animal products and too much junk food and too much animal protein. So my only comment would be, stop worrying about protein. There's no science saying you need to for longevity, and just focus on eating. It's much more important to eat the right foods than it is to figure out how to time it, like Tricia said, I think. Just eat the foods that nature intended you to eat. It will take care of itself without a calculator.
So I just want to add and comment. There is research regarding when we age that we can lose muscle mass and muscle function if we're not eating well, if we're not eating enough protein, and if we're not moving. And one of those things that can happen is called sarcopenia, loss of muscle mass, loss of muscle function. So to prevent that and to be independent as we age, we do want to get enough protein. And I totally agree with Bruce that the World Health Organization says 15%, 10 to 15% protein is adequate. In our country, we say 10 to 35%. There's this huge window. A lot of the research done on protein and aging is done by a researcher that's also paid by the beef industry. So I have a lot of problems with that. So you just want to be a little skeptical and look at beyond our borders, beyond the U.S., what's going on in the rest of the world and what are they saying. That being said, in our country, we have a guideline of 0.8 grams per milligram of protein, 0.8 grams per kilogram protein. And for aging, most health professionals think it should be 1 gram per kilogram. However, when I work with lots of people and I talk to vegetarians, they are often very low in their protein. So for them, the 0.8 gram per kilogram, I'm okay with that because they're eating all plant foods. But that one gram per kilogram protein does seem to be important for preserving your muscle mass, and it's even a little bit higher if you're trying to lose weight, because when we age, if we're looking for weight loss, we can lose our muscle mass and we can lose our bone density. So it's important as we age and as we make recommendations to people 50 and above, and especially 65 and above, that protein comes into the conversation. Are they eating? They should be eating some, and maybe not as much as we think. They should be eating some, and the resistance exercise is one of the best ways to preserve your muscle mass. So if you're a Zumba teacher and you're and that's what you do, you want to help your older adults by recommending that they also get some resistance exercise as well. So we look at the whole person.
Fantastic. All right.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back. There is a researcher out of Texas A&M University whose name is Richard Kreider, and he's not paid by anybody from any meat board. And he did 18 landmark studies where he took women who worked out at Curves so that he knew what their workout was every day. And of course, you walk into Curves and they swipe their card. And in his 18 studies, he manipulated their macronutrients. And the studies where the women had the highest amount of lean protein, and it did not specify whether it came from plants or animals, dropped the biggest amount of body fat and maintained their biggest amount of lean muscle mass afterwards. So I think what we have to look at is get people away from the fact that, or from the thought process that all the protein has to come from meat. You can eat complementary proteins in the way of rice and beans, or anything that's a whole legume or a whole grain and a legume, and you can keep your protein intake high without taking in the fat that comes with an animal. That protein doesn't have to equate to an animal protein.
Fantastic.
Do you want to say something?
I do. I think that I am a fan of plant-based eating, which doesn't necessarily always mean vegan or vegetarian eating. So for me, it's mostly fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and some salmon or chicken or other things like that. So that's kind of where I come from. And that being said, it is difficult to, if you like to lift heavy and if you like to maintain lean mass. Now, everybody has different goals. Some people are more happy with more curves than others. Some people are more happy with lifting light. So it really depends on the people's goals, and we need to keep that in mind. Some people, they don't care a bit about their longevity in the moment. They just want to see this or that. So obviously I tell them that, it's my job to care about more than the moment for you. So I'm going to give you what's going to help you most in the moment, and then we're going to talk about how to move that into a lifestyle goal. That's how I try to speak to people, telling them I'm thinking about their big picture. But I do think it's hard to maintain lean mass, especially as aging, without prioritizing protein. I know for me and for others, it helps with satiety. Now, if you're a really good vegan, then you can do it because you're really conscious about being careful. But if you're a typical person, then you're probably just going to eat kind of whatever's handy. And if it doesn't happen to have protein, then you might be backfiring on some of that weight training and resistance training that you're doing, because you're not going to rebuild that muscle without the protein there to reassemble it at the best, in the best way. Does that make sense? So a lot of times people, if they're very conscious and if they're being really careful to eat those foods and complementing their proteins and all that, then they can do fine. But if they're just kind of half-hearted.
It's not that hard.
You're good at it though, Bruce. I have a lot of my clients will eat like a can of soup for lunch.
Do you think
They really do, and like 3 chocolate chip cookies.
But then, isn't the goal then to help them move more towards a healthy diet? Say, well,
It is.
I can't help you if you're going to continue to eat this.
That's not exactly how I say it, but
That's
I
what
do.
I mean. That's Sohailla and I differ a little bit. She's
I
great.
do.
She can help anybody.
I do
A lot
work
of
with
people
them.
walk away from me.
Well, and I think asking them what's typical for them, and then without doing that, but you see where they are and where you need to take them. And if you take them in big leaps, they just won't go. You take them in baby steps if you care about their big picture progress.
Fabulous. All right, right there.
Well, I think you're right on target with recommending a professional. So I think you could find a dietitian that specializes in eating disorders, and there are many of those. There's an association called the Eating Disorders Association, right? Is that in Massachusetts? They call it MIDA. It's like the mass eating. So your state might have a state eating disorders. So you could even recommend her to that. But through that, you can find therapists, psychologists, and dietitians that can work. Because I find that people need a team. I look at everyone as a puzzle, and let's help them get the pieces of the puzzle. You're one piece, and other pieces can help in their puzzle. So I think it's great that you're thinking like that already. So that's what I would recommend. I think balanced diet is important, but it might be a little bit more. And if you find helpful articles, you can share that with her about balanced diet. And I think, like Sohailla said, meet people where they're at. And I think maybe with her, it is small steps. When I work with people and I coach them, so, all right, what do you want to work on this week? And I can make suggestions, but it's basically meeting them where they're at. But if it sounds to me like she's having some issues, so maybe just recommending a dietitian or a counselor or counselor.
Great.
I think we can be part of the problem on this and not part of the solution a lot of times, because we have kind of extreme regimes or big statements that we say, go hard, go home, other things like that. I really think that our mindset and our language as leaders needs to change. I've been using the progress, not perfection hashtag for a while. And as an author, I've gotten plenty of messages back from people that have said, that hashtag has made such a big difference to me. Like, I put it on all kinds of things. And then every holiday when I'm out there, I say, strategically savor slowly. And so I'm not that dietitian that's saying, be sure you don't eat chocolate on Valentine's. I'm saying strategically savor slowly. So they're starting to get this messaging that's regularly they're hearing someone say, you can have it, but have it intentionally and mindfully, and then you won't have so much, and put yourself in that position. Or you're making progress. And so changing our language, instead of being, soon you'll be up to an hour and you can come to my hour-long class, saying, how many minutes can you give me? And if they say 20, you say, okay, I'll look for you at 5 o'clock, and I'll expect you to head out at 5:20, and I'll be proud of you. Helping them make those small steps, and us being part of the solution, I think is a big thing. So when it comes to people with food issues, by the way, raise your hand if you think one or more of your people have food issues similar to what she's saying. This is our fitness population, guys. Almost more than 50% of my clients have disordered eating issues. They might not be at diagnostic levels for hospital admissions, but fitness is offering that. And sometimes we're part of that problem because we are, all the different filters and everything out there is adding to it. So we really need to have a mindset, and we need to have hashtags and quotes and things on our social media and everywhere that make sure they know that progress is adding up. It's not perfection that's going to add up. So that's a lot of times where these people are getting this mindset, and that they've tried so many diets, all of which compete, that they can have, oh, I skipped breakfast. That's okay. I'm intermittent fasting today. And then they have lunch and be like, oh, dang, I forgot to have any. Oh, well, that's okay. I'm on keto today. Like, they're going to do that all throughout the day if they keep having all these messages. So we need to really have streamlined messages. I address a lot of these things on my blog. So if you, I have a recipe card I can give you all on the way out that has my blog on the back, so you don't have to write it down, but it's bestbodyin52.com/blog, and there's lots and lots of these questions that I address because they're specific to my clients as well.
Great. Melissa?
Anybody with disordered eating is out of my scope as practice. It should go to a registered dietitian.
And then even as dietitians, we
Well,
team up with
my
professional
question would
counselors.
be, if most of the country's overweight, is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Would you consider that a result of disordered eating?
Yes.
It could be.
I think
what
the
else-
fitness
what else would it
population
be?
is
Lack
not
of
representative of most of
activity.
the country.
Say that again?
I personally think that our fitness population is not representative of most of the country.
Well, I would just say that I think most of us have disordered eating because most of us are overweight. And there's a simple solution if you're willing to embrace it. That you don't have to worry about it. And it's quite simple, and we can just eliminate the whole issue of the weight problem. Your client, you were talking about, what does she like to eat? And if she's been going from diet to diet to diet to diet, and she's not ready to change her behavior, it sounds like. So I'd buy her the book
desperate.
How Not to Diet by Dr. Michael Greger. And it is nothing but scientific research about the optimum way to lose weight. And I'm here to tell you, the optimum way to lose weight is a whole food plant-based diet without any added salt, oil, or sugar. You can go home right now.
This is one too. It's offered here today. This is how not to diet too. It's just how to break it down into small, sustainable changes one day at a time over 8 weeks. They have it at the booth.
And I just want to piggyback too on Bruce. So I learned about Dr. Greger and that book through Bruce, and then I took the cookbook out of the library, the How Not to Die cookbook. It's really good.
good.
So great plant-based recipes in there. And then what I did is I took some of those recipes and I've simplified them, because sometimes you'll have a recipe with 10 ingredients and you might just need 3 or 4 to actually make it good and make it fast. So that's what I've done with that. I love that book. I think it's really helpful. I just want to dial back to a comment about Valentine's Day, because our country has these holidays that are just so food-centered. So my approach with Valentine's Day, because we have so many different people, and I do lots of programs where I'm talking to a group, and I think that for some people, having a little bit of chocolate where they eat it mindfully can be okay. But for other people, they have sugar, and they want more and more sugar. And so I like to meet them where they're at, but tell them it's actually okay not to have chocolate on Valentine's Day. This year, I opted out of that. I didn't want it. And one year, I got a weight bench as a Valentine's Day gift. And that's like the best gift that keeps on giving. And I love it. I see it every day. It's in my room. It was from Valentine's Day 2015. The best gift ever. So in our country, we have very food-centered holidays, and I think some of them, maybe we can take the focus off of that a little bit, just because Whitman's or Russell Stover says we have to like honor Valentine's Day. Do we have to listen to that? So just a little bit of, talk about some holiday eating, because that's one thing I like to
Great.
share.
Up the back.
I'll let
Bruce.
Bruce start.
Honey is delicious. It has no nutritional value. So I would say it's just like sugar, right? So it's a lot of sugar. And I wouldn't convince yourself that eating honey or strap molasses or agave or any of these other things are any better than sugar, because they're sugar. I also love maple syrup. That's really yummy, but it's all sugar. It turns out if you're looking for antioxidant capacity or nutritional capacity in your sweeteners, date syrup or date sugar is typically the least offensive because it does retain some fiber and micronutrients. It's basically just dried dates, and dates have a lot of nutrition in them. But having said that, I put maple syrup on my roads every morning because it's delicious, not because it's healthy. It helps me eat the healthy stuff.
Honey raises your insulin levels, so your body does become anabolic when you take honey in. There's no nutritional value. It is a little disruptive to the arteries. It is rough. It is an exfoliant to your arteries. So again, I'm not a big proponent of syrup, honey, sugar,
I like that.
anything like that.
Yeah, just think of syrup.
Okay, so awesome that you go local, because there are some allergy fighting properties for your local honey. So that's a good thing. And moderation is the key. She was talking about honey being abrasive. All sugars are abrasive, so we weren't just picking on honey.
No,
all
not at
sugars
all.
are abrasive,
Not at
especially in excess. I do think the less you have of it, the less you want of it. So if you're trying to cut back, even putting 1 drop less for a week and then 1 drop less for a week could help you cut back, because your taste buds very much reorient. Especially every 5 days or so is what I've seen. There's not been research on that. There may never be research on that, but that's what I see in my population. About every 5 days or so, their taste buds get reoriented. So that's really helpful if you can kind of stick with that. I am not against cutting out sugar, because I think it's part of life for a lot of people, but I do think that it can be a monster that you'd rather not fight. So if you're just putting a little bit of it in your tea and it's not causing cravings, for me, if I have a good bit of sugar, all I want is more sugar. That to me is not worth it, because then it's not a small, enjoyable part of life. Then it becomes a raging monster that I have to tame. And so with my clients and folks, I recommend 2 teaspoons or less total over a day, which is very doable. And at 1 teaspoon, which is 4 to 5 grams, by the way, and 2 teaspoons is 8 to 10. And if you're wondering about that, what that looks like, a teaspoon, if I had my teaspoon measuring with me, which I usually do, it's around here somewhere. If I put my thumb in it, it would fill it. So that's about the amount. And so usually that's enough for people to get through with there you go, put my thumb in there. There you go. Get through your coffee, your tea, a couple maybe grams in bread or other foods that have a little gram or 2. But if you can keep it under 10, I have largely seen that people can maintain their cravings there and still enjoy foods, enjoy healthy oatmeal because it makes it a little sweeter or whatever it is. But when people go over that, I'll be real strategic, because if you go over it and then you have the thing you went over on it at home, and then it becomes 10 at night and you're weak in the brain, don't we all get weak in the brain around that time of night? Then you might overdo it. So I would just be careful about going over that. That's what I've seen.
What I recommend to people is if they are going to do sugar or artificial sugar, I say avoid the artificial sugars. They're associated with cancer in animals. Diet soda is associated with dementia and stroke and heart attack. When you if you are going to do any sugar, I recommend honey or maple syrup. And like Sohailla said, honey may have some immune properties. So you want to get it where the bees are flying close to your home. You don't have to get it from New Zealand to get Manuka honey, because we're not near there. So get it local. And then same thing with maple syrup. Can you get it somewhere where literally you could go hug that tree? So do you have any maple syrup farms near you? And I would get it local. But it still is sugar, so I would keep your intake as low as possible. I usually say 0 to 3, but I agree with, Sohailla's saying 0 to 2. I think we're really close on that. American Heart Association says 6 teaspoons a day is your limit for women and 9 for men. I think that's way too much. There was some research I looked at out of the UK that talked about bringing that you get greater health benefits bringing it down to 3 teaspoons or less a day. So I think that we should just keep it as low as possible and keeping our diets palatable. Bruce adds it to his oatmeal because it makes it a little bit palatable for him. So I think trying to keep it as low as possible. One of the things that I looked at recently was sugar and your skin. And sugar can advance the effects of aging of your skin. So it's just another reason not to eat sugar, but it also affects your memory as well. So we want to keep it as low as possible. But it's a really good question.
Can I add one thing, Kelly?
Yeah.
You guys all raised your eyebrows, or many of you, when we said 6 teaspoons. It sounds like a lot because you saw this as a teaspoon, and if we just spooned this over 6 times, it sounds like a lot. If you eat 2 packets of oatmeal, Quaker, that has the sugar already in it, that's 6. Okay? That is without any other food the whole day. Most people have easily passed 6 by noon. I would say almost everyone in this room has passed 6 on a normal day. Unless you are very conscious and you're not eating processed foods at all, you've passed it without even knowing it. It is super difficult for the population that I do. When we do my first week of this, when we do the 8 weeks, the first week we do 1 teaspoon at the most. It is super difficult because people are reading labels and are shocked as to how much sugar is in everything. So it is hard to do. And when she said 6 and you raised your eyebrows, I want to tell you that's 100 calories worth of sugar. So it's really not a huge dessert. It's a very small amount that adds up that way, especially if it's a liquid. Because if people drink a few sips of sodas, they're there so quickly because if it's liquid, it's so concentrated. So syrups are another one. If you have enough syrup for 1 pancake, you've almost had, at least 4 teaspoons because it's so strong. So there are some things like sodas, syrups. There are some things I just completely avoid, and sodas and syrups are 2 of them. So I would just be really careful when you have your, sorry, Bruce. If you
No
have,
more maple syrup?
I do the steel cut oats that don't need it because they're so good and toasted.
I'll give you another little fact. There's more sugar in 3 tablespoons of ketchup than there is in a Krispy Kreme donut.
That's what I'm saying. People don't think they've eaten it, and I'm like, but we have.
Well, that's it. But this is also a good example of confusion. Do you think a donut, when you see a donut, do you see a carb? Do you see a carb? Well, what's the number 1 component of a donut, you guys?
Fat.
Grease.
Fat, 100% processed plant fat that is going to attach to your hips. The fat you eat is the fat you wear. And so people think, the donut's a big carb. Well, the donut is a big wallop of fat that's going to be applied to your hips. That's it. Stop eating all this. We talked about you can just easily surpass the recommended daily allowance. Stop eating processed foods. It's the only way you're going to do it. You eat too much salt, you eat too much sugar, you eat too much. It's already done, just like Sohailla says, that by noon, and you don't even know it. And you've already exceeded. You already have high blood pressure. You already, you're gaining. And it's just, you don't even realize this because it's coming out of packaged foods that the first, second, and third ingredient are salt, sugar, and fat. Stop eating that. And things will get better. Just stop eating out of a pack. I think one of you said, you don't eat anything out of a pack. That's a good...
Not unless I'm starving.
Don't eat out of a pack. If it's got a bunch of words on it, it's not food. Food.
Hey.
Bring an orange.
That's food right there. Anything in a package is not food. Like these candies at the fitness wellness conference. And the candy
I think Hyatt put them
and
out.
the candy bars we sell. You look at these candy bars we're selling.
I want to piggyback on Bruce just for a moment. So one thing that you can think about is what I do is cut up an apple and put that with the oatmeal and then some nuts or a little bit of nut butter. Use fruit to sweeten up your oatmeal, so then you won't need that. You don't do that? You do that?
He knows that.
He knows
He said
that.
he knows that.
And then I just want to leave with this. There's a company that's across our country that says America runs on their products. And I beg to differ because this is a coconut caramel swirl frozen coffee. There's 173 grams of sugar. You divide that by 4 to get teaspoons, 43 teaspoons.
It's smoking.
So this, I know. So,
That's actually lower than the pumpkin spice one we did last time.
isn't that interesting? But look at how much sugar is in there. It's just unbelievable. And you don't realize it because when you taste something like this, you're going to say, ooh, it tastes so great. And you probably won't say it tastes too sweet because they have people that are manufacturing it that make it taste so wonderful that many people go online for this, and you see these long lines at that at that place that's covered up. And it's because what goes back to what Sohailla said, you have this and you crave it. You tried it once, now you want it again. I call this kind of stuff frankenfood, and I think that the less we expose ourselves to junky food, the less that we'll crave it. And I'm glad we have a clementine there, because in cultures of longevity, when they're craving something sweet, they reach for fruit. They're not reaching for that kind of stuff.
There are actually people, guys, that work for national chains that work with something called the bliss point. And the bliss point is the amount of sugar that you can put in a food and have it light up your brain to create a dopamine response so that you want more. But the people who work to bring sugar to the bliss point do not go past the bliss point to where somebody drinks it and says, oh, this is too sweet. So they actually pay people to hit the bliss point with their food. And I was going to say something else, and it totally left my mind. But yeah, maybe it'll come back to me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, mice who are addicted to sugar water will actually walk over a shocking panel once they become addicted to the sugar water, because the dopamine receptors in their brain fire so hard for them to go get some more of the drug, because that's what it is. It's a drug.
And then they'll step over a line of cocaine to get it too.
It's more addicting than
It's
the
more
cocaine.
addictive
It's
than
8
cocaine.
times
Rats
more
will
addicting.
go for sugar water before
Yeah.
once they're addicted to cocaine.
So
they'll still
practically
prefer-
speaking, if you want to cut back on sugar because you're like, well, what do I do? That's me, right? That could be you. For at least 5 days, I'd aim for 7. You need to get an accountability partner, and you need to kind of break up your routine. Like if you know that your sugar happens here, and you every night want to go to this spot, or at work you want to go to this spot, you need to put yourself, environmentally challenge yourself so that you're not facing
Change
all
your
that,
environment.
and make it easier on yourself. And by the time you hit day 5, you'll be mostly freed from that. If you're really a sugarholic, you probably know by now that you are, and it might take you up to 10 days. And this is experiential research from my groups that I do this with, because they log on the page. This is not going to be researched most likely anytime soon, because who's going to pay for that? But I see a lot of that when I post my people. What day has your cravings dropped? And it's usually between 5 and 10. But it helps a lot if you're in a different place. Like when I'm here at the hotel, I'm not looking for some of my normal little things I want at home. And so do some mind tricks on yourself to make it easier. Go out of the house at times that you would want those things. Give yourself something really satisfying in your hand. And I know you might roll your eyes and think that's not satisfying. It really is, more and more so each day that you cut back on the other. So put those things in place so that you're, it can't market on full. Chips Ahoy don't look appetizing to me on Thanksgiving, right? If I'm feeling nourished and full and good, then little, it's not going to faze me, right? So be ready for it.
I would just have a little bit, for me, we know pure sugar is not health promoting. We would all agree with that, right? Cigarette smoking is not healthy. And so when we want people to get healthier, do we tell them, well, just smoke cigarettes on Tuesday and Thursday. And then the rest of the time, don't smoke. But keep smoking on these days. And I'm making an analogy here. Give it up. Don't tease yourself. If you're addicted to sugar, stop it. Go cold turkey. You can do it. Anybody can do it. You just have to stop. And the way to stop is stop eating packaged food. If you want to quit smoking, you don't smoke nobody's going to tell you to smoke 4 cigarettes a week until you stop. Smoking 4 cigarettes a week, what does that do? That makes you want to smoke more cigarettes. It's the same thing with sugar. It's the same addictive properties. Just stop. That's my guidance. We go to these things, you guys, we do 9 of these a year. It's all sugar, sugar, sugar. I get it because it's mostly, I don't want to be sexist, but it seems to be, women struggle with sugar more than men. That's been my experience. And it's
True.
I'm here to tell you the weight issue is not sugar. The weight issue is fat. Sugar shoveling it into your body, it sure makes it taste good. But if all this talk about sugar, you're never going to lose weight if you just eliminate sugar.
No, if you
You
overeat sugar, the carbon in your body becomes toxic to your body, and that carbon, to avoid having toxicity in your body, gets changed into adipose tissue. So too much sugar definitely can add weight gain.
Good reason to just stop eating it. And eat fruit. Eat all the fruit. You eat fruit till your head explodes.
Yes. Why do some people not lose weight when they're under eating?
Yeah, even over time.
Over time.
Still exercising.
And still exercising.
It doesn't make any sense on paper.
Okay.
I'll take that. I think people often underestimate how much they're eating. And they might do 5 days of perfect eating, then have a freak end.
Yeah, I
And the
agree.
freak end is they go nuts on the weekend.
That's it.
They're drinking wine, right? And they're going out to eat. And they might not be telling you. And then they go back to perfect eating Monday through Friday. Also, if you think about, anyone ever go to the deli counter or the fish counter at the supermarket and you tell them you want 1.5 pounds of fish, what do? How do they know it's 1.5 pounds of fish? They weigh it. Now they're weighing that every day, how many times a day? They're the experts in weighing food. They still don't know what 1.5 pounds of fish looks like, so they have to weigh it every time. So for those people that are saying that, are they weighing and measuring? Do you really know what they're eating, or are they eyeballing it? So I do question, and many people do, they underestimate how much they're eating. So I'm concerned about that. So I think that's a big piece of things. And I think that if they're not logging their food, there's no way to really know. So I think an app like MyFitnessPal can be really helpful. I know it's not 100% accurate, but I find it's pretty close. When people start logging, they start figuring out what works for them in terms of their calories. So for that particular person struggling, I would say, do you want to log your food? I have a client on Lose It, and she logs, and I go in and we kind of look on Lose It and see what she's eating. And then we kind of figure out where she needs to go from there. It's hard to know. You're with them 1 hour. They can tell you everything, but what are they really doing every day, day in? And there might be little sneaky sources of things that they're not even considering, like the wine. Mindless eating, exactly. And wine intake. You might say, I don't have my wine glasses. I'll have them out tomorrow at my
That's
session.
not food, so it doesn't count.
Right. But the wine glasses, they might tell you, oh, I just have 1 glass of wine. But the glass is this big. And, it's really like 3 or 4 or 5 glasses. It can really add up. So I just think that my opinion is a lot of people are underestimating. But it's a great question.
Yeah.
I love this question. I would say that is a huge issue, is awareness. They don't mean to lie to you.
Right.
They don't even mean to lie to themselves. They're just not aware. That's part of our obesity problem, is that we eat mindlessly because we're just munching. A lot of people don't count their splurges as their food. Like, they don't tell you they had 2 or 3 glasses of wine. Heck, they don't even know they had 2 or 3. They just called it a couple of beers or whatever, And it ends up being more than they think. So I do think the awareness factor of what they're having is big. I also think the disordered tendency to, if 1,200 worked, 900 might work better on the calories, for example, and they go down and down and down. I do see that a lot. And I do see a lot of people eating under. And there's not a ton of research on under eating because not many people want to sign up for that. But it's between 16 and 20% of how far your metabolism downgrades itself, which is quite a significant metabolic adaptation. Whereas, aging might affect you 2% in your 20s and 30s and 40s, and then 8 to 9, 10% in your 50s and 60s. That's how much it's going, your metabolism is declining. But when you undereat what your body needs, it declines quite like a nosedive. And so that really is an unfortunate cycle. And then what happens is what Tricia said, that restrict usually triggers a binge cycle. And a lot of times when people are binging, they don't even know how much they're having. And so they do that Monday through Friday perfect. Then they're mad about how perfect it had to be. So they cheat on the weekend. And then they come back to day one and repeat. And a lot of times the research shows that a lot of our functions overshoot after having deprivation. Our cardiometabolic functions overshoot. Our fat tissue overshoots. So if we're doing this yo-yo life, and that's why I'm so big on getting people to SSS, strategically, savor, slowly. If you see some things in your week that you want to do, if it's a party, if it's this or that, think about when it's going to fall and look forward to it if you love it, but don't do it all the time. And really don't do it mindlessly. Write it down, track it. And for some people, the tracking, if they already have disordered tendencies, makes them worse. And so that's why it's helpful to know your people before you make those recommendations. But I'm a fan of a plate, using a plate. And then if they don't eat it off a plate, I tell them put it on a plate anyway. Like, just put it on a plate, because having that white backdrop or whatever backdrop helps you be more mindful of what you're actually doing. And then if it's a drink, if they're really struggling, drinking caloric beverages are just not helping them in any way. But they're not going to give up their wine when you say that. And that's okay. I just tell them pick one day a week and one day a weekend. Can you do that for me? And usually they'll meet me there. Or they'll say I can do 4 for you instead of 7. And it's huge, guys. It's probably one of the biggest things we deal with, because most of our people have enough income. They're not the people we read CDC studies about. Our population is not that population. So watch out for your people and get to know them before you give them too many recommendations.
I was with Josh all day yesterday for the nutrition coaching cert, but I think the one thing that we also had to keep in mind, I totally, completely agree with them, but in America, we do not sleep, rest, and recover like we should, so our body stays under stress so much longer, and if we don't have a cortisol level that rock and rolls, if we just have a cortisol level that stays up here, when your cortisol levels stay high, your body naturally increases your glucose levels. And if you're not doing anything to bring those glucose levels down, whether it's sympathetic or parasympathetic training, those glucose levels will increase your fat. So I think we need to step back and we need to look at the hormones that are affected by the lack of sleep. If you don't sleep, you're not making growth hormone, you're not making testosterone, and your cortisol levels are staying high. So I think we also need to have people start tracking their stress levels and their sleep hours.
I don't think your client's telling you the truth. I mean, it's calories in, calories out. You know, give them to me, I'll lock them in a room. They can exercise all they want or not exercise at all. I'll get them to lose weight, but you got to watch it. People don't want to tell you what people hate telling. You know, we talk about food law. I want to log all the food I ate today. Nobody wants to do that, right? And it's just people don't want to tell you the truth. I'd also say exercise is not an effective tool for weight loss, so take that out of the equation and focus on the food. It's food. It's always been the food. It always will be the food. It's the food. And we didn't talk about what they eat. I have no idea what they eat.
There are metabolic things that can happen in your body that can throw off your metabolic processes, Bruce. It doesn't matter whether you're eating plant or animals. If there are endocrine glands in your body that are out of whack, it can throw off your metabolism.
Oh, can
I'm just one other comment, and then I'm just looking at the big picture here, you guys. We
have to individualize.
We do not have a problem of insufficient calories in this country. That's not the problem. It isn't.
But this is our
malnutrition
population.
is not the problem. It's too much of the wrong kind of food, period. It's not that complicated.
I know. We really have made it so.
And the only reason it's complicated is so people can make money off of you.
Keli,
That's
Sohailla,
it.
yes, Sohailla.
Okay, so actually George Washington University has some dietitians and a researcher that are studying this local. If you're local to here, I would strongly suggest that you get your resting metabolic test done. And your client, and you don't have to be local, almost every area where there's a university has this done. If somebody is really struggling, it might be their thyroid, it might be some hormone issues, or the estimation that we make on calories, even as dietitians, is still an estimation. And I've been following this team of researchers and practitioners, and they're talking about how you might size someone up and think that their RMR is going to be this, and then they sit with a medical grade metabolic cart, and it is not. Everybody's bodies really are more variable depending on hormones, depending on sleep, depending on stress, depending on stuff they'll never tell you, even if you ask them. There's so many factors. So I think we really do. I appreciate the big picture of our country, but I don't think our population is very representative of our country. I've worked exclusively in fitness for 25 years, and most of my people do undereat. And that's when they're paying attention. And then they do have those binge cycles where they're not. So I will say that's a big factor. But many of them, especially the women, the worse it gets, the more they undereat. But they do overdrink, which often evens out the calories. But it's super important to have a better number for people who are struggling and give them some tangible numbers. When you hit a 700 calorie deficit, which is almost any diet, on that first week, almost everybody hits a 700 calories deficit on a diet. right? Because it's like, oh, I've got to change everything, and this isn't so yummy, and this is hard, and I don't get my chocolate, and I don't have my wine. And those big deficits have a big metabolic adaptation in our body. So if we can get people to make small, gradual changes, they actually will stay better without the metabolic adaptation. And so if your RMR is 1,500, you don't want to go less than 10% below that. That's when we see the plummeting of the metabolic adaptation. So it is a real thing, and I do think our population as a whole as Americans are not struggling with that, but I do think especially our young ladies between 20 and 50 and even older are struggling with that, and we need to be aware of it. But we also need to help them to be accurate observers of themselves and ask them to be mindful. That's probably the first practice I would work on, is when you're eating, do you have distractions around you? Are you paying attention to the food? Are you savoring it? Are you mindful? Those things really do help people pay attention.
I just want to add on about, because it was said that exercise doesn't help with weight loss. In the active aging population, if you restrict the calories too much, you can put them at nutritional risk. So part of the equation for weight loss, especially with active agers, is creating a deficit partially through exercise. But nutrition has to be a piece too, but we need both of them.
Fantastic. We need to move on. Melissa.
I always like to add the statement that I stole from these two. If you have a healthy relationship with food and you are not a disordered eater, I truly believe in intermittent fasting. The research to date, and there's not a lot, but there is some, shows that intermittent fasting is helpful to bring your body back to a state of homeostasis. Obviously, because you are decreasing the amount of time that you are eating, you will see a caloric deficit, which will help some people lose weight. Technically, intermittent fasting isn't designed to help people lose weight, but it probably happens because think about it for women. Like we said, your toughest part of the day is usually at night. You put the kids to bed, you've taken a breath, you've sat down, you want your glass of wine, you want your bowl of ice cream, whatever. But intermittent fasting shows that if women can fast for 14 hours with nothing but water, and men can fast for 16 hours with nothing but water, it brings your body back into a state of homeostasis. And that's where we seem to have a problem in America, especially since however long ago we were told, make sure you never let yourself get hungry. Eat every 2 to 3 hours. Well, we're never giving our body a chance to feel what hungry is anymore. Our stomach doesn't growl anymore. Your stomach growls because there's hydrochloric acid that doesn't have any food to mix with it. If your stomach doesn't growl, there is food present in your stomach. So the point of intermittent fasting is to bring your body back to homeostasis. And now with all the research that is going on about the gut biome and how much good bacteria lives in your stomach and how much that good bacteria affects your mental health state, if you give your gut bacteria a chance not to digest your food, it actually has time to grow as a biome. Your species numbers grow bigger. So we know it's good for your gut biome. Because you're not eating, your insulin levels drop. When your insulin levels drop, lipolysis speeds up.
Tell them what lipolysis is.
Oh, lipolysis is the breaking down of fat, sorry. Whenever your insulin levels are high in your body is always going to turn to sugar as your main fuel source, carbohydrates, glucose, glycogen, whatever. When your insulin levels are low, you turn on hormone-sensitive lipase that helps you burn more fat. When insulin levels are low, your growth hormone is also higher. And when you get that intermittent fasting, your insulin receptors become more sensitive. So the next day, when you do have a high glycemic food or a low glycemic food, the insulin levels that come out, and your insulin pulses, it doesn't just open the floodgates, it pulses as you need it. You need less insulin because your insulin receptors are more sensitive. So with a healthy relationship with food, the information, the research is there that intermittent fasting is helpful, and weight loss may become part of that equation.
Fantastic. Sohailla.
Well, because I work with the active aging population a lot, I looked at some of the research and I found an interesting small study that found that when you make your fasting window, like Melissa mentioned, the window in this study was 16 hours of not eating. So that's overnight. Basically, you're sleeping and you're expanding your window of not eating at, a little bit like at nighttime. And then I think it's like if you do 6 p.m. to 10 a.m., am I correct that that's a 16-hour window? Yeah, okay. So let's say that's your window. So you're not eating between that time. Well, they found that weight loss was happening in these they tested them for 4 weeks doing this program. It was very small, but they did find a good amount of weight loss, and they were looking for weight loss in this program, and they found that the intermittent fasting was very helpful. I feel that more research needs to be done in this area for sure. It's kind of like the keto diet where there's no long-term research. However, I think there's a lot more promise for intermittent fasting then I don't think there's any promise for keto really, but I think intermittent fasting can be something interesting to try. I have clients that are doing this and it's actually working for them. So, and Sohailla mentioned this earlier, we work with people where they're at, and that's what I do when I coach my clients. So I have a coaching model, that's how I work with people, and I work with them whatever they're doing. If they're on Weight Watchers too and they want to work with me, great. If they're doing intermittent fasting, great, let me work with you and see what we can do. And I'm seeing results with this, and it's just pretty interesting to me. So my eyes are open on it, and I think that years ago, I know that we weren't really pushing fasting years ago, but it's really, I think it's changed over time now. And again, that goes, like she said, if people are having eating disorders, then I wouldn't push them toward that. But if someone wants to try it, I think that it might be helpful for people. Now, when I wanted to learn more about it, I started looking at research, of course, but listening to blogs too. I wanted to hear what's going on. What is everyone else listening to? And there are these ladies, and you can probably find them if you look up intermittent fasting. So they fast all day, and then like between 10 and 12 at night, they were binging. And they're talking like on their podcast, like this is normal. And I'm like, that's not normal to binge and eat all this crazy stuff between 10 and 12. So we want, when you are eating, so the window where you are eating, let's say that's an 8 or 10 hour window, we want that to be healthy food, and we don't want to be binging during that time. So just some food for thought.
We don't ever want to be binging.
No.
Okay, so I think all of those are great points. So just from a practical standpoint, like I said, my clients are all gym goers for the most part, so I'm working with people similar to what you might be working with too. So I think it's really important to think about where they're coming from, and if they, the research is good enough that I tell them, when can we do a cutoff in the day that's realistic for you? But I don't just arbitrarily give it to them. Like I'll have clients come in and say, my personal trainer says I can't eat after 6, and I'm a nurse and I work till 7:30 and I'm so hungry and been on my feet all day. I'm like, yeah, you don't just arbitrarily say, everybody, we're not going to eat after 6. You really do have to get to know your people. And I would say, okay, what's the first time you eat in the day? Can you try to wrap up your eating within 12 hours? The good research, and there's better research and more research at the 16, but there is some decent research, would you say, at 12. And I think that's actually really reasonable to eat breakfast at 7 and be done eating dinner by 7. And so I like to start with something that's reasonable, because if we go too far and they're nowhere close, then they're just going to write us off. And they need us to support them. So I say, let's try to aim for that 12-hour. And actually your sleep is going to be better. Lots of things are going to be better on just on a noticeable level for people. And so I think that's a super good place to start. And I'm not a huge fan of intermittent fasting because of the people that I work with. For a fitness population, it makes me nervous. The men that do it, that want to do it, I usually will support them if I know that they don't have that background, because I think their bodies are not as likely to fight against that, because their bodies are not childbearing, et cetera, and all the different things that hormones play into. But I do think aiming for 12 isn't a bad idea. I think America eats so much that if we say, hey, let's close all the restaurants at 6 at night, that would do us huge favors. Not because there's any window that 6 has to cut off, like my people's personal trainers tell them all over the place, but because we just need to try to work within daytime hours. Really, when the sun's up, that's when we're meant to be awake and eating, and when it's down, that's when we're meant to be not having bright electronics and food. Both of those impact our eating. Caffeine, alcohol even impacts our eating. If we use it to fall asleep, it's still going to wake us up all night because it messes with our sleep cycles. And so I think really eating less food from processed and more in a 12-hour daytime window, and moving towards the 16, especially if you have insulin sensitivity issues, wouldn't be a bad idea. But I'd say try for that 12. But that's my personal more
Great.
starting approach.
Fantastic. Bruce?
Well, we've been talking about intermittent fasting. What does that mean?
Leaving a window where, well, it could mean there are different methodologies to do it, different ways to do it. We're talking
Right.
about one where it's at.
So a
that-
daily.
not the
We've
It's a
been
time.
mostly
daily
talking
thing.
about
No, not necessarily. Some people
usually
do a
once a week.
5-2 method where they're 5 days,
Right.
they're not fasting, and 2 days they are. So there are
Yeah.
different ways
There is
to
a
do
five-
it.
Sure,
too.
sure. So there's a lot. The point I'm trying to make is the term intermittent fasting doesn't really mean anything because what does it give me the specificity? Fasting is good. Eating less calories is good, but I'm a big fan of fasting. Fasting is one of the most powerful tools we have to recover our health. And I've done an 8-day water-only fast, and I intermittent fast because I eat 25 days a week, 25 days out of the month, and I don't eat 5 days a month. The last 5 days of the month, I don't eat any food, period. All I do is drink water. And I'm here to tell you, it's the most powerful thing you'll ever do to your body. You just feel young. It's a regeneration of stem cells in your body. Your blood pressure drops, and I'm just telling you my own personal
Are you
experience
working
here.
out, Bruce, during that 5 days?
Absolutely not. And why?
He's not
why would you
parenting
work
either.
out?
That was my
He doesn't
thought.
have
I-
teenagers.
So here's the thing about fasting, you guys.
You've been doing
Intermittent,
that while you
if you're
have
trying to lose weight, okay, I guess it's just another trick. I mean, again, my number one thing would say, what are you going to eat when you're done? However long you're going to fast, what are you going to eat for the rest of your life? That's way more important than fasting. You can be doing all these tricks, in fasting, and if you go back to eating the same foods that are making you sick and overweight, it's going to come right back. The number one thing is that you help your clients move away from disease-promoting food towards health-promoting foods, and it's so simple. Stop eating processed food and animals and eat plants. The science is stunningly clear on this. And we talk about all these different foods. It's so simple, but you have to do it. So intermittent fasting, if it's 5 days where you don't eat and then 25 days where you do, I'm a big fan. I occasionally go a whole day without eating. I'll occasionally go 3 days without eating. And I haven't died yet. And every time I do it, you know what I feel? Younger, stronger, and more powerful. It's a powerful, powerful tool, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise until you've tried it yourself.
We have 3 minutes left.
But that's just my opinion.
Do we have
No,
a
that's
question?
science, actually.
Do we have a question that's completely different, and we'll do 1 minute each? Completely different
One over
topic.
here.
Yeah, no, it's generic.
Go to bmrcalculator.net. The Mifflin St. George and the Harris-Benedict equations come up, and by activity level, you put in their athletes. That comes up, and you'll see how many calories. It's bmrcalculator.net. And I use that because we used to do Mifflin St. George longhand, and this does it quickly in a snap for you. And you can know exactly what. Now this is an equation, and our bodies are all different, but you can know from there. It'll say, I don't know, 2,200 calories for the young, someone young. And if
And
you
you
put
need
in
to
the
say that.
age, gender, and height, and activity level, and it comes out with the number. And it's Mifflin St. George is one of the more accurate, or one of the equations that has more accuracy compared to some of the other. There's many predictive equations for how many calories you need, but that's a pretty good one.
Will that consider the older women that may have hormonal issues?
It's putting in their age, so it
So
takes
that can
into
be calculated,
it takes
that
into
kind of
account
stuff in there.
age.
Great.
But it's still
okay.
an estimation.
Right. It's still and everyone's individual.
Okay.
It's a good place to
Sohailla.
start.
So nobody knows this but y'all, and then whoever's on the screen. Today, for the first time ever, I had my RMR tested because I've been following those researchers. So this morning, really early, I went into DC, and they said if I put on Bmr Calculator, my number is like 1237. That's what mine is because I'm petite.
The RMR.
That's my RMR. Yeah, not what I need in a day, but that's my resting. You need about 30% more than that if you're active like me. Well, then my actual was like 1547. It's in my hotel room. I don't know exact, but it's somewhere around 1200 something, somewhere around 1500. So that is a big difference. 300, that's a small meal or a big snack difference. So these are estimations, and we do our best with estimations, but they are estimations. And I think it's super smart. It's worthy of investing a couple $100 because it can last for at least a year. You don't need to get it done for at least a year. It's really, really helpful for people who are stuck. And if athletes are doing that much work and that much effort, it's really helpful for them to know. And then at George Washington, they actually do calculations with you and help you set up your macros and stuff from it. And some places may or may not. So if you do get it done, try to find someone that has a dietitian on staff there, and I can help you find a handful of them if you want. But I don't think it's for everybody because it might make you obsess about the numbers. But I do think for people who are working so hard and hitting a wall, it's helpful to know their accurate numbers. It's a fasting test.
I totally and completely agree with them and the calculations they're using and everything they said, but you seem to be focused on the women who have gone through menopause. When our estrogen levels drop by about 50%, which is what happens on that day of menopause, the glycerol molecule that is on a triglyceride actually becomes harder to cleave off. And if the estrogen makes it harder to cleave off your glycerol molecule, that triglyceride floats in your bloodstream for longer and has a greater chance of turning into adipose tissue. So menopausal women do have a greater challenge with dropping fat. All right, so it is a research fact that estrogen affects your lipolysis level.
Great, Bruce. Last.
Everybody has a different definition of clean eating. And so I don't have a definition. I don't know what it means. That's number one. So if someone says to me, I'm a clean eater, I don't have any information. And then number two, what I'll say is it isn't how much food you eat, it's the types of food you eat that's really important. So focus on eating from nature and eliminating all the foods that we've been talking about the whole time here, which are, well, at least that I have been, animal foods and processed foods. The problem will take care of itself. But you got to know your clients, man. Your clients don't tell you the truth. Nobody wants to talk about what they're eating. It's just hard. And so I know if you just eat the right foods, the problem is going to take care of itself. But I can't help anybody.
We're completely out of time. Yeah,
Can't
we're
help anybody.
at
Know what they're
I wanted to
3:47.
ask you about the impossible. What would you do if I'll ask you?
Y'all don't want to leave, do you?
No.
Well, make sure you write that on your evaluation.
Yeah. We are completely out of time. If you have any questions individually for the panelists, I'm sure they can take some questions.
Thank you, Keli.
Thank you so much, everyone. Awesome job.